This is a KRQE News 13 Winter Weather Special.
Good evening and welcome to this KRQE Winter Weather Special. It's about time they let me take over the show, and you know it's pretty serious because sleeves are up and we're going to roll tonight. And in fact, we're going to take an in-depth look at what we expect to happen this winter. We will break down if we will even get an El Nino, and if so, what will that mean? We'll also look at our vaunted weather models. How have they done so far predicting what's going to happen this fall and into the winter? And we will wrap up with our Weather Nerd Roundtable. Some of the best weather minds in New Mexico, definitely not me, but a few other guys who are, will predict what we expect coming up this winter. And we'll break this down like a Cowboys football game, predictions and all. We start off, though, on a different path. I'm asked all the time, why do you root for storms? Well, first off, it's exciting in this job. And secondly, we need the moisture to keep fire danger down, snowpack up, our rivers running, and obviously provide all the moisture we need to survive. But there is a huge financial reason the state of New Mexico needs the snow to fly. David Romero kicks off this weather special with that story.
It's what thousands of New Mexicans and tourists count on every winter. Hitting the slopes for a good time. But when the snow isn't falling, that could put the ice on some big cash for the state.
The ski industry is a $409 million industry here in New Mexico. So those are the dollars that are coming into our state, basically for people who are wanting to ski.
And when Mother Nature doesn't come through, that's where man has to step in and make up that difference with snowmaking machines like the ones you see behind me here at Taos Ski Valley. Now, if it wasn't for those, it would make for some hard winter months for the resorts in the state, as well as a bad season for skiers and snowboarders.
So while we always would like to have great snow from the sky, we've invested a lot of money and have got ourselves in a situation where through snowmaking, we're able to open by Thanksgiving without natural snow. We're able to open the majority of the mountain by Christmas without natural snow.
With 8 major ski resorts around the state, managers we spoke with say they cannot afford to rely on Mother Nature alone to provide snow. And the cost to make it outweighs the number of dollars lost by not being open at all. Providing machine-made snow is almost twice as important in smaller destinations like Sipapu.
So the cost of making snow for us is hundreds of thousands of dollars. On an annual basis, it's close to $500,000 of what we spend to put the snowmaking product out and the grooming so that we have a good ski experience. So it's a sizable investment.
Much like the snow covers the mountains, their good fortune covers outer-lying businesses like restaurants, shops, and other retail outlets. A good winter season can have lasting effects throughout the year.
So I think that there's the direct impact of folks coming here, bringing their dollars, leaving their dollars here, but there's a lot of indirect impact as well. The jobs that are created when folks have the ability to come and take advantage of our skiing. So it's jobs that are for our friends, our family, that now have jobs thanks to the ski industry.
Well, I have a saying for everybody out there. Every day it doesn't snow is a day closer till it will.
David Romero, KRQE News 13.
Except for those days seem to be getting pushed farther and farther back. So what's going on here? And we've talked to you all fall and really back into the summer about what we expected for our winter outlook. Remember, we started off here a few months ago and really back as far as 6-8 months ago, looking at the possibility of a moderate, maybe in some cases a strong El Nino. As we look back to the numbers here, this was about 6 months ago, and I want to kind of guide you through this here and what we're dealing with. To get an El Nino, we need to be a half a degree above average temperature-wise for 3 months in the Pacific. Well, these were the forecast numbers about 6 months ago. These are huge numbers, really, really warm. If we had this happen, we're talking about a blockbuster El Nino. Well, what's happened here? We found out that these numbers don't look so good. In fact, they don't look accurate anymore. That part of the forecast is gone. That is not going to happen. Here's what's actually starting to happen. Through the month of November, now we're starting to warm into El Nino territory. In fact, if we get a couple more months of this, we will officially be in an El Nino because we're at 0.6. Remember, we got to be at 0.5, but we're at 0.6. So now we're expecting really the takeaway here is a weak El Nino at this point. So not quite what we were looking at forecast-wise. And if you look back at the long-range models, they showed a lot of storm activity across the southwest through the fall. Has it happened? No. A killer ridge is set up here and really kept the storms well to our north. Yeah, we get an occasional scraper that comes through, brings a little bit of cool air, but for the most part, it has not worked out. And so you know this much. If we've got a big high over us, the above average forecast, which we had 6 months ago, ended up being below average. So overall, you got to start feeling like, is this going to work out at all? We do have some optimism. In fact, we have a warm Pacific here, and we do have what looks like still a weak developing El Nino. So in most cases, when this happens, we do end up looking at a pretty good winter weather outlook. And that is at least to some degree still on track. More on that in just a few minutes here. But increasing indications are that we may have to go farther into the winter to start to ramp up the snowfall, and then that could last into spring. So a later start is looking more and more likely. We'll talk about that too in a few minutes. But when you do get an El Nino, does it really help New Mexico? Well, Chris Gilson has the numbers on that. Chris.
Well, everywhere in the state really benefits from an El Nino. And taking a look at the percentage of normal rain and snow for the months of December, January, and February, when we do have an El Nino across New Mexico, the numbers look pretty good. Farmington picks up more than 100% of their normal rain and snow at 121%. Los Alamos does 10% better than normal. So around the north, it's not as great, but as you get farther to the south in central New Mexico and places like Albuquerque, Socorro, we pick up more than 30% of our normal rain and snow during El Nino winters. Then it gets even better in the southern portion of the state around the Sacramento Mountains like Roswell and Carlsbad. Take a look at those numbers. 154% of the normal rain and snow comes during El Nino winters. So they're pretty impressive numbers if we do get some El Nino effects here in the winter months. Mark?
Chris, thanks very much. Appreciate it. And very good work with the numbers. So we know this fall hasn't exactly played out to plan, but is there still reason for optimism? Meteorologist John Smith has our winter outlook. And John, don't let me down. Seriously, let's make this work.
I'm going to try not to let you down. We are looking at a much better setup than what we were looking for the fall, at least as far as the forecast goes. Now, when is the last time we have seen a forecast going into the winter like this one? We're above average for precip. You have to go back to around 2009, and it looks like we stay above average for precip all the way through the winter months. So even though we've been off to a little bit of a late start so far this winter, we haven't had those blockbuster storms like we saw in early November of last year. That may not necessarily be a bad thing as long as we can keep the precip going through February and into March, and we can get that snow going as well. If you remember last year, we were off to a very good start, and then we started to see things kind of fall apart through mid-February and into March as well. As far as the temperatures go, well, this is another piece of the puzzle that's really promising, at least as we look at below average precip, or at least below average temperatures across the eastern portion of the state, and that eventually starts to sweep into more of the state as we move into the latter portion of the winter months. And of course, that does mean that we have better chances of seeing that snowfall not only at those higher resort levels, which we're going to see anyway because it'll be cold enough, but may also mean that we have a better shot at maybe getting a little bit of that snowfall at some of those lower elevations with those below average temperatures combined with that above average precip. So right now, the forecast looking good all the way through March and into April as we look at the precip and the temperatures combined. Mark?
Yeah, John, thanks very much. And again, what we're looking at more and more is a late arrival of some of that precip rolling back into New Mexico. KRQE has you covered this winter with a brand new weather app. Once you download it, you won't believe all the features inside: an hourly forecast for where you are. You can turn on the location services and get your forecasted weather as well. You can also program weather for the zip code that you want. Interactive radar for New Mexico and the United States as well. We'll have our video forecast and weather alerts coming right into the app too, and you can monitor school closings and even send video and pictures through our Report It on the app. Well, we will be right back in just a couple minutes with our Weather Nerd Roundtable. What do the guys think is actually going to happen this winter? We're going to break it down for you when we return. Welcome back to our KRQE weather special. Now it's time for the Weather Nerd Roundtable. We don't have a round table, but we do have a couple of weather nerds with me here. So we're going to talk a little bit about predictions. To my right here, Carrie Jones from the National Weather Service, Chuck Maxwell from the Southwest Fire Coordination Center. These guys are good. They know what they're looking at. They've been looking at all the stuff we've been looking at. First of all, guys, we've seen this sort of develop over the spring, summer, into the fall. And a moving target is the best way to describe this. We looked at maybe a pretty good El Nino, now that's wavering. What are you guys seeing with this pattern? Is it weird as we look and try to tell New Mexicans, are we going to get an El Nino or not?
Well, there's a collective optimism for sure. I think, as you guys pointed out, I mean, it's a pattern that we have not seen in at least 3 seasons. And when we talk about outlooks, Mark, the phrase I like to use, climate trains the boxer, but weather throws the punches. How many punches are we going to get this winter? I mean, I'm confident we will see them.
Right.
It's just a matter of, as you said, every week that goes by this time of year, we're losing out. I mean, we're looking at a season that's roughly 5 months long, and we can't spare one more week without a good storm. So, but I would say that we haven't certainly seen the pattern overall that we're looking at in at least 3 seasons.
And Chuck, you were talking about, we talk about warming ocean temperatures, which gets into the El Nino thing, but that's not the only factor here, obviously.
Right, there's lots of factors. Weather is controlled by many things besides just El Nino, and sometimes those things have more of an influence in any one given winter than El Nino. So we're looking at the big picture. It isn't just whether or not we have El Nino, it's what actual weather occurs.
And so as we look at the whole picture here, and you guys have seen kind of the full picture we've got. We do have what looks like at least a developing El Nino to some degree, but that big ridge we've talked about it, this big ridge is kind of blocking everything out.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, we had a storm that looks like it's headed in our direction for Sunday. Even that now looks like a bit of a scraper storm.
And that's just it. I mean, El Nino Southern Oscillation is a coupled ocean atmospheric system, right? So a lot of within the meteorologist community, the head scratching that's going on is more of the atmospheric response to what we're seeing currently in the tropical Pacific. So we haven't seen a typical pattern develop in terms of the atmospheric, and the jet stream pattern and so forth. So you're right, we need to see a definite change before we get too excited in terms of getting storms every 3 to 5 days, which is what we need.
Yeah, and you should look at this, Chuck. Do you see that change? Have you seen any indications that this high, which has muscled us out of everything, is moving or is weakening to the degree that we could start to see regular storms rolling through?
Truthfully, no. From what we've been looking at, we see much of the pattern we've seen in the recent days and weeks continuing, with a few storms maybe breaking through, moving across the southwest. They may be very wet storms, but we're talking about a handful of storms setting the tone for the entire winter precipitation.
And just one thing I think it's important to point out is the outlook for winter is December, January, February. Some of our biggest storms, Mark, as you all know, is March.
Yep.
And even into April. And so collectively, we talk about the winter season, we're talking again about that 5-month period. But as Chuck said, I mean, we need to see some changes soon, because it's eaten into that 5-month period. So.
And part of the reason we wanted to do this weather special is to impart upon you guys the complicated nature of this, because you can see the long-term outlook. Oh, it looks better, it looks okay. And sometimes in a weather forecast, 3 minutes long, or what you guys are able to put out, or what you guys study, you can't get the full picture. It's complicated. There's no question about that. And when we start looking out, we've looked at a variety of models here. One thing that we're kind of settling on now is just kind of more of a late arrival, which is exactly what you're talking about, right, Carrie? So that we may well go through December and not be looking great before we ramp it up closer to March and April.
And even our previous El Nino winter, which was 2009-2010, we only had 3 storms between roughly late October and through the middle part of November. So, but then the switch was flipped, and so December we had a fairly good parade of storms that delivered. So. We'll see. We'll see. I mean, that's how it is.
We're under a minute, so it's time for predictions, boys. We got to know. How do you think we're going to do winter into early spring? If you had to just hedge your bets, you're at the casino, you're pushing it all in. What are you in on?
And as a very good weather nerd, I let Chuck go first.
You go to me first? All right, then. I'm going to say it's going to be wetter than typical across far northern New Mexico and portions of eastern New Mexico, and colder there as well. Warmer, drier, further south and west in the state.
Okay.
I say we get a dozen good, decent winter storms between now and late April.
Love it. And again, I like the late arrival here. We may not get started until January, but we're likely to go well into April. We appreciate your time. We appreciate you joining us here. And if you've had enough nerd for the night, you can now retire. We will see you back here real soon.